Hi, I'm Kim Coco. Today's yin class is going to be on opening up the liver and gallbladder meridians. So we'll work through poses that open up the body in those areas, as well as focus on the energetic aspects when in balance, such as kindness, generosity, compassion, initiative, and a sense of courage. So I recommend a bolster if you have it. If you have other pillows that might be able to help prop you up as well, that might be a nice option. And take your props if you want them. We're going to start in a wide-legged child's pose. So you can use your prop if you want to. Go ahead and allow the feet to rest underneath the hips and the knees to splay wide. And then you can take your props in between your knees if that feels like a good idea for you. And if you have really a lot of tightness behind the knees or the ankles, you might prop up a blanket underneath the ankles or between the calves and the hips. And take your time to extend your body forward and turn your head to one side and just decide if you want to reach your arms out in front of you, out to the sides, or back behind you. And see if you can start your practice with an internal sense of ease, of settling in from whatever's happened in your day thus far to this moment, with a sense of acceptance and not trying to change anything, just observing what is. Notice the breath and its natural rhythm in this moment. And then as you deepen your breath, simply begin a mental checklist of any sensations you feel in your feet, shins, knees, hips, torso, side of the ribs, shoulders, head. Notice the palette with which you're starting your practice today. If your head turned to one side, go ahead and switch the direction. And notice if you can use your breath as a way to soften in to a greater sense of ease, no matter how minuscule to start. Can you find a nice even rhythm of breath where the inhale is just slightly shorter than the exhale? And can you feel the breath expand all the way in around the ribs, so pressing down into your pillows or bolster or the floor, all the way out to the side and up between the shoulder blades. For the next pose, you can stay where you're at in a tadpole or a nice wide-legged child's pose. If you want to come up into frog, you can go ahead and bring the hips above the knees and then slowly begin to walk one knee off to the side. If you have an additional blanket, if you want to turn sideways on your mat, that might be more appropriate as well. Lightly flex the feet so there's a 90-degree angle at the knees, and then the hips are in line with the knees. And then again, you can rest down onto forearms or elbows or down onto your props. And allow the inner edge of the feet and calves to sink down into the floor. Allow the hips to start to drop down toward the ground. And notice here, can you find a way to soften into the breath yet again? Sometimes it might take a few moments to figure out what's going to be the most comfortable for you. So I might fidget here with my props myself so that I can find a way to rest. If you're still in tadpole, go ahead and turn your head back to the other side. If you're in frog pose, you might turn your head to one side as well. You might rest your forehead on your hands or on a block or your bolster. I think that's going to feel good. But part of this system being in balance is having a sense of good judgment. And that's really being able to tune into your inner compass, knowing what's going to be the right direction for you, what's going to be the best variation of a pose for you, how deep into that pose do you want to go. So can you already start to acknowledge a nice healthy liver and gallbladder meridian by choosing the posture that's going to serve you best here, really only at that 50 to 60, maybe even 70% tops position of effort, so that your body can truly rest here. Again, if you have your head turned to one side, switch the direction so you can find some evenness in the neck. And again, allow gravity to drop the hips closer to the ground, the torso into your props, and even a deeper sense of heaviness at the head. You've lost a connection with your exhale. See if you can tune your attention there again and slow it down for your last minute here. As you inhale, slowly start to walk your hands back up underneath your shoulders from wherever you've been. If you're coming from frog, just slowly start to rebend the knees a little more deeply, coming onto hands and knees, and eventually everyone will all meet on your belly for Sphinx pose. So set your props aside. Come down to rest. Stack your hands one on top of each other and let your forehead rest on them. And just pause for a moment and notice the condition of your hips. Can you soften the space between your toes? Maybe even feel the front of your pelvis lightly press down into your mat, and then extend the right leg straight back behind you. Reach it back maybe further as though someone was tractioning your leg longer, and then replace the right foot on the floor. Feel the left front of the pelvis dropping down as you extend the left leg long and back, and lower it down on the ground. And then notice the length on the front and back side of the spine. As we begin to move into a gentle back bend here, slowly begin to walk your elbows up underneath your shoulders, and then make sure you can reach for opposite outer arms. That way you know your elbows are not too wide or too close together. And then you can go ahead and extend the forearms so they're parallel to one another. And we're going to be here in our Sphinx pose for about 3 to 5 minutes, and you'll just depend on if you want to move on or not. So take a moment here, and as we start this posture, see if you can feel the forearms, the hands, the knuckles, the fingertips press down into your mat. And then can you feel the forearms hug in toward one another, toward the midline of the body? And then can you draw the shoulder blades just lightly back to open up the collarbones? And then allow the spine to drape down as though it was just a hammock, lightly dangling between two trees. That being said, the heart will start to turn forward, and then soften your gaze, soften the neck, soften the throat. So here there's that nice juxtaposition of a little bit of effort to hold you up, where you're pressing lightly into the floor, broadening the collarbones and turning the heart forward, but at the same time tuning into ease, letting the spine drape, softening the jaw and the breath, the pelvis, even feeling the pinky toes on each foot anchored down into your mat. Many times it's common to effort through back bends, even as subtle as they might be. So notice here, how can you let go some? How can you find a hint of freedom, a speck of ease, a tiny little spotlight on feeling comfortable? And can you begin to broaden that light? Make that speck more vivid, and shine your attention on whatever aspect of this pose, no matter how small, can already make you feel more free, more comfort, more comfortable, more stable, more balanced. Take about 3 more deep cycles of breath here. And then decide if it's a good fit for you to stay here in Sphinx. Maybe you need to come back down and take a breather for a moment. You can stay. If you want to go further still, slowly begin to straighten the arms, coming into seal pose. Again, still pressing down through the base of each knuckle of each finger, lightly down through each fingertip. And then this time, instead of pressing down through the forearms, feel the bone-on-bone stacking so the head of the humerus sits comfortably in the shoulders. The shoulder blades can drop down the back, and then the collarbones can broaden as the scapula retract closer to the spine just lightly to keep the heart open. But then ideally let the spine rest in its natural curve as you find a deeper rhythm of breath. And if you get here and you notice, holy cow, you can't breathe, back off and come back to Sphinx. Can you find a position for your neck where all four sides feel equally long and the crown of the head reaches out away from the spine, and the gaze can again soften, taking in more information from your periphery. Again, 3 more deep cycles of breath. Exhale, slowly releasing back down, letting your hands stack and the forehead rest on your hands, or turn your head to one side and pause. Maybe take your right knee up closer to the right side of your torso, just allowing the low back to lengthen once again. Seeing once if you can notice any new sensations without judgment or critique. Simply an observation as to what is, with a deep level of acceptance. Extend the right leg back behind you. Maybe take the left leg off to the left side. Turn your right cheek towards the floor. And pause there. And again, when you're ready, taking your way back to child's pose, just lightly pressing yourself up and back. Maybe you want to take a little more movement and go through tabletop pose and decide to take a few rounds of cat-cow. So with the wrists underneath the shoulders, gently taking an inhaled back bend and an exhale to tuck it around. Maybe you want to tuck the toes under and lift the hips up and back for downward facing dog. Again, with bent knees or straight legs, or maybe a little bit of pedaling out the heels. Just adding a little bit of movement between each posture. And then we're going to come to swan next, also known as pigeon in our yang-based practices. So maybe lift the hips up and back for downward facing dog. It's a nice place from which to start. Walk the left foot maybe towards the middle of your mat. And if you want to stretch the right leg up and back first and open up the hip, you can. Just make sure the left hip moves back in space, left forearm lifts. And then look between your hands, take the right knee behind the right wrist so that the right shin comes down at an angle. And again, any props that you would like to have in front of you or next to you to help support the torso can be very helpful. Otherwise, feel the first few breaths here to press down into that right shin, draw the right hip back in space and square the left hip more toward the front of your mat. Broaden the collarbones and keep the heart open. And then as you exhale, take your time to fold in. And we will be here for a few minutes, so notice how quickly you can settle in. Some days the hips can be a little more vocal than others. So see if you can engage part of this meditation from Thich Nhat Hanh. Breathing in, I calm my whole body. Breathing out, I smile. Finding that generous sense of compassion for yourself in the moment as you enjoy this lovely stretch. Breathing in, I calm my body. Breathing out, I smile. If your mind has wandered at all, bring it back to the mantra, breathing in, calm my whole body. Breathing out, I smile. Simply let the tongue rest in your mouth and soften the jaw, soften the throat, Soften your eyelids and even the eyeballs closer and more deeply set in your sockets. Feel the heart remain open so the collarbones naturally stay broad. But simultaneously fill a space between the shoulder blades on the back side of the body. And send the breath down to the side ribs, the hips where you still feel sensation. And let your head get heavier wherever it is. On your next breath in, slowly make your way back up. Roll onto your right hip. Swing your left leg out and around in front of you. And you can take the left shin in front of the right for Sukhasana. Or you can cross the left knee over the right for Gomukhasana legs, or in yin known as shoelace pose. But from here, take your right hand out beside you, reach that left arm up, flip the palm over to the right, and then go ahead and stretch that left arm up and over to the right as you sink that left hip down. Maybe let the right ear drop to the right shoulder and hug the right elbow into the right side of the body. Got a minute or two here to lengthen this entire left line, softening the left shoulder blade down away from the ear, and keeping no more tension in the head or neck than necessary. So the right ribs turn lightly toward the front of your mat. Draw the left ribs back. Can you soften somewhere for the last 3 rounds of breath here? So you inhale next, making your way back upright with that left arm, and exhale, release. This time take your right fingertips back behind you, left hand over to the right leg somewhere. See if you can tilt the pelvis lightly forward as you sit taller, and then slowly begin to take that length of the spine into a gentle twist over to the right. Feel the left hip drawing back in space. As the belly button starts to turn around to the right, the left side ribs start to turn more forward. The right shoulder blade turns back and hugs more closely to the right side of the spine. And then use the leverage of that left arm into the right leg to help you twist. But keep the collarbones broad and soften the gaze. You even turn your head so that the chin's still over the heart. And now as the breath is slightly constricted, can you more generously turn your attention there? As you inhale slowly again, make your way back through center. And you can stay more upright with the hands behind you, tilting the pelvis forward, lengthening the spine. Or you can let go and keep your spine tall and maybe start to walk your hands a little further forward. Again, a lot or a little to take a nice forward fold. Letting the head and neck drop. If you are in Sukhasana, keeping a just light flex of the feet to protect the knees. Your next breath in, slowly make your way back up. And then unwind your feet. Bring the feet hip distance apart. And just windshield wiper the legs side to side a little bit. And then when you're ready, we're going to make your way back to tabletop, down dog. Couple rounds of movement momentarily before we come back to the second side. So again, maybe that's just child's pose. Maybe it's a few rounds of cat-cow. Maybe it's massaging out the spine a little side to side. Then we'll make your way back to a downward facing dog. Maybe walk the right foot in, stretch the left leg up and back, maybe bend the knee, maybe open up the hips. Look in toward your hands, step the left knee behind the left wrist. Again, left shin at an angle back toward the right hip. Unless, of course, you have a more open swan practice, then by all means take that. Otherwise, press that left shin down to draw the left hip back in space. Maybe even walk that right foot back slightly as you square the right hip toward the front of your mat. Open up the heart and keep the spine long. And then take your fold and exhale. Rest into your sleeping swan. As you feel the back of the pelvis level. Reconnecting with that sense of ease. Second part of that phrase from Thich Nhat Hanh is, I recognize this present moment. Or breathing in, I recognize this present moment. Breathing out, that it is a wonderful moment. So enjoy the privilege of being here, of being present, finding a sense of wonder and awe and contentment in it. And find the lengthening on the front line of the body as well as the back as your hips descend. The head feels supported by the surface beneath it. Breathing in, I recognize this present moment. Breathing out as a wonderful moment. As you inhale next, slowly begin to walk your hands back up underneath your shoulders, roll onto the left hip, and swing the right shin around in front of you. Or you can take that right knee on top of the left for shoelace pose. And from here, allowing that left hand to come to the left side of you, flip the right palm up, and then stretch up and over to the left. And notice here that as the right side of the body gets longer, the left will have a tendency to wrinkle up. So can you lengthen the left side of the body as well? Can you feel the left ribs moving toward the front of your mat and the right ribs drawing back? As maybe the left ear descends, the right shoulder blade descends, jaw relaxes. You feel an anchoring in that right hip so that you can laterally bend the spine here. Having the courage to stay for the last minute with a deeper round of breath. On your next breath in, slowly inhale back up to center, and exhale, release the right hand down, take the left fingertips behind you, right hand to the left thigh this time, or left leg somewhere, and then slowly begin to rotate your spine to the left. So keeping the sitting bones nice and level, the right hip drawing back. Find a nice balance between lengthening, taller as you sit up, and then softening in so that the ribs can rotate around the spine with every exhale. Finding a nice balanced position for the head atop the neck. Stay for your next deep breath in. And exhale it out fully. When you're ready to inhale, come back through center. We'll take your forward fold. So again, maybe that just means opening up the heart and staying taller. If you want to actually take that more into a fold, walk the hands out in front of you, a lot or a little. Topping yourself up as you need to. Letting the head and neck drop. Notice the mental space that you're creating here just by being. Fill it up more deeply with your breath. On your next breath in, walk your hands back up. And again, you can take the legs out in front of you with the knees bent and windshield wiper the knees. Or you can windshield wiper the legs with their extended out in front of you, whatever's going to feel the best. And then we're going to go ahead, and I recommend taking your mat to a wall space, taking the short edge of your mat to that wall space. And if you want the bolster underneath your hind quarters, the low back as well, you might choose to take it there. Or we're going to go ahead and take legs up the wall pose. So go ahead and take one hip to the side of the wall and start to recline on your back, kicking both legs up the wall. And if you have tighter hamstrings, your hips can be further away from the wall. If you have more flexible hamstrings, maybe you can scoot your hips right up to the wall. And then take your first few moments here, maybe just stretch out, decide how long can you get your spine, how long can you get your legs. And since we worked a lot in the outer hips, we'll open up and get the adductors to lengthen now. So you can take a nice wide legged V shape with the legs in your Viparita Karani here. And let the feet flop out. Any arm position that feels good to you, take it. So maybe it's arms out at the side, maybe you bend at the elbows to get a little more into the shoulders. And now notice for the first time being on your back. Sense of the back ribs lightly pressing into the ground with each inhale. The whole torso sinking down into your mat with the exhales. Can you begin to already notice a change in the mental space, the emotional space, or the physical space of your being? Now can you let go of the rhythm of your breath? Allowing the body to breathe itself, but yet keeping that sense of alertness at the mind's eye to observe the pace of the breath. Notice where your mind goes as your body's in stillness. Can you stay connected with your breath? The pauses between it. That compassion toward yourself as you accept where you're at in the present moment, without the need to change it. You can choose to stay here longer if you like, or begin to deepen your breath. Maybe send the breath down to gentle movements of your fingers and your toes before slowly rebending your knees and helping them in toward your chest. Pausing there for a moment. If you are making your way out of the pose, slowly roll over to one side and make your way up to a seat. Noticing the renewed sense of energy in the body and the mind, an internal sense of courage to face whatever is next in your day or the coming week ahead, and a compassion with which to deal with yourself along the way. So thank you for sharing your practice with me. Namaste.